I want to invest the time so that I leave a legacy and an impact behind beyond the time just spent.
Asking deeper questions of who someone is as like a person and their history and all of that, and then taking your gifts as what they hired you for with your own like unique vision, but then be able to like mirror that back to them where you're actually focusing on what they want and just like highlighting those areas, which is very different than just trying to tell people what they want.
Everyone has one central core value, and that core value is really the stem or the seed that all of the others come from. And that's what really brought me into realizing that like my number one core value is connection.
Welcome to the show. Today we have the delightful Samantha, who wears a couple hats. I know her first from Kinetic Experiences. She's the genius behind the amazing events and networking events that she curates. We and Jessica, we went down to Santa Barbara, was it just a couple months ago? And end of March, yeah. We had an amazing time and just was blown away by her intention and the ability to just create a really cool environment to network with like some of the top people in the industry in a really down-to-earth way that we really appreciated. And then she is also founder of House of Joy events, and then also House of Samantha, which is for education. So you have a lot going on, which is really cool. And then we were chatting a little bit beforehand, but you're just, obviously we got to see firsthand how talented you were by being in Santa Barbara, creating an event at the beautiful El Encanto. I was very fortunate to be able to share breakfast together. I think one of the mornings we were able to talk a lot about books. I'm obsessed with books, so I'm always talking people's ears off about books. So it was fun to talk to you about that and just self-development and all that fun stuff. But is there anything else you'd like to add to that? Thanks for being on the show. I'm excited to get in all things.
Thank you. I'm so excited about this and so excited about what you guys have started here. And I just think it's going to be a really, really fun conversation, a really, really great platform to sort of share different thoughts and ideas that go a little bit deeper too. So I'm really excited about it.
Oh, I love it. Well, to kick things off, I want to throw you a little bit of just a fun question. When we look over, this could be like recent or
this feels such like a role reversal.
Oh, I know. Isn't it fun being on the other side? You're usually asking questions, putting everyone up on stage. So what is the smallest shift that you've ever had, whether personal or business, that had the biggest impact, like ripple effect?
Oh, I think for me, the shift is going from trying to keep everything that I was doing separate and sort of the terminology my previous corporate job always said was like siloed. So I sort of always tried to keep everything I do siloed in its own sort of container community, within its own company, and really taking a look at that. And I like to share the analogy of like a tree, right? You sort of every section of the tree is a different company or a different value, and really coming back to sort of the roots and who is at the center of all of those and what stems from that. And that was me. That little bit of shift really sort of opened up so many opportunities for me to kind of collaborate with myself, collaborate with others, find sort of dual ways to connect and create opportunities with other companies and other businesses, and sort of serve in a more multi-layered way rather than trying to figure out how everything needed to fit into a particular like space or box.
I love that. Well, tell me more about, corporate, how,
so I used to work,
this before House of Joy?
Yes. So I used to work for this is like another lifetime ago. I used to work for a plastics manufacturing company. It was really sort of my foray into the corporate event world. I have a degree in marketing international business, and I started working for this manufacturing company in marketing, and I kind of built their entire marketing department as it stood at the time. And I started taking on their holiday parties and their corporate events, and I did company trade shows for them in Orange County, Florida, not California. And we would take, they had a big group of customers out on the West Coast. We would do whitewater rafting trips in the Kern River Valley, horseback riding adventures, surfing trips and all that. So that was really sort of my entryway into the corporate, I would say the official side of it. If I back up, I got into events earlier than that. But so I used to work for a plastics manufacturing company. They sort of, everyone was very segmented, and it was sort of part of the company culture where, not in necessarily the best way, but everyone was really sort of siloed in their individual areas. And I came in as a recent grad thinking like, okay, this is how we can utilize manufacturing in our marketing. And if we get this tech expert to come in on, these educational videos. Yeah, back in the day I created all sorts of YouTube videos for them and did some hand modeling with their stuff and lots of voiceover work. So I'm comfortable talking But yeah, I used to work for a plastic picture. As I like to say, I know more about plastic than the average bear. So, it's
So was this your
interesting
job out
little.
of college then?
It was my job out of college. Yeah, and I
Oh,
worked there
okay.
for 5 or 6 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And you said you were doing their marketing. Did you go to, was that you said you also, is that what you got your
I
degree
have a
in?
degree in
Marketing?
marketing and international business, and they were an international producer. So they're sort of the middle ground for, in the material process. There's raw materials, then there's sort of the middle ground compounder, which is what they were, and then there's the original equipment manufacturer, the OEM. And so they would basically make a middle concoction. So if you think of a dairy farmer who sends their stuff to an ice cream warehouse, the ice cream
Mm-hmm.
warehouse is going to make their base mixture of chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and then they're going to send it to each ice cream store and they're going to add the next layer of mix-ins.
Mm.
So we would take all the raw materials, which would often come in sort of dust particle and like a dust compound version, right? Not like liquid or a solid. It would be basically like a dust or a fine grain. And it
Mm-hmm.
would go through this mixer, heat extraction, then it would go through the compounder. It would be extruded out. It would slice it up into pellets. I would always say like little tiny rubber balls. And then we would ship little tiny rubber balls all over the country, all over the world. And it would get made into just about anything you can think of, from like reusable container lids to dog toys to a lot of people's car mats, pen holders, so many grips on things, a lot of phone cases. So yeah, we had all sorts of the most
Yeah.
random, the snot suckers that babies use, to sort of all sorts of fun little products. That our material in particular is what I like to say is when plastic and rubber have a baby, it's called a thermoplastic
Mm-hmm.
elastomer. So
Wow.
it
Well,
was
that's
a, it was
something
a
I
very
definitely
interesting
did
thing
not
to
know.
learn how to
Wow.
market to a bunch of engineers and to advertise.
Yeah. So you're doing the marketing, international business, and then how quickly did the planning the custom, like sorry, not the customer, the company Christmas parties,
Yeah, so
whitewater rafting, like how did that all come about?
it was sort of really natural into starting to work for them, because
Mm-hmm.
I want to say I started working for them in the summer, and then it was like October, November, and I was just thinking like, what do you all do for your birthday? Like, what do you do for your holiday parties around here? And the answer I got was, we just go to the bar down the street. And I was like, we're not just going to go to the bar down the street. So it's like, I'll take a baby step. So we had the bar down the street, but we like rented a room. We did this stuff, and we
Mm-hmm.
did, we gave back the manufacturing side. The warehouse runs 3 shifts. And I was like, you have to, like, advocating that you have to close. Like, it's important for our office people to be able to know the third shift
Mm-hmm.
people, and for like the whole company to really know who all these people are rather than their names. And so that was sort of the segue. And I was like, all right, well, we did that. Like, what else do you guys do? And let's get bigger. And then because I did it, the other things that had happened maybe 3 or 4 years before me, they were like, oh, well, now this person's doing it. Well, like, let's ask her to do this too. And let's ask her to do that
Mm-hmm.
too. And it was working really well. I was young. I was, I had a lot of thoughts to get it done. I had a lot of momentum and a lot of energy around doing it, and sort of the fun challenge of it, having never had done it before, that I was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, sure, what do you want to do? But like, give me enough free reign to do it and research it. And it
Yeah.
was a great benefit to them. And still, when I do corporate events, it's a great benefit to them, because I free up HR, I free up marketing to go back and do what marketing should be doing. But it was great, because it was the company events, internal company events, were actually a really, really great way to develop company culture. And so they were sort of a great segue for me, from the marketing side into kind of helping develop a little bit of the company culture.
Yeah. Doing that, what would you say is a lesson you learned that like still to this day stuck with you, that you learned now? Cause you have a team, right? With like across your different, I know are working with like a team also for producing obviously large scale events, but even internally, like whether it's day of and like event specific or just your own internal team, what was the biggest kind of takeaway you'd say that you learned while working there that you kind of like still apply?
So I'll add a little book in here too for people who like their books. It's about getting the right people in the right spots. So if you've ever read the book Traction, this was actually a book that the corporate company actually brought in a traction advisor, and it's about having basically the right people in the right seats on the bus. And they approach it from an interesting perspective of having really big company rocks, breaking those rocks into like smaller, tangible, pebbles, smaller tasks, and like checking up on them regularly. It's one of the easiest ways that people fall off having goals at the beginning of the year. But for me, it's really about been finding the right people in the right seats. The people who are early morning risers should be the early people on my shifts. The people who are night owls and can just kind of pound it out until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning are going to be a better shift for that, right? The people who are more introverted or super numbers, super focused on every single detail are better in the tent production wise. And those who who are more customer service minded are better being out, mixing and mingling, being, client and guest focused at everything that we do. So it's really about sort of finding those people's skill sets, understanding where their attributes are. But also, I think from a leadership role, just understanding and discerning through what they are and how they present, but how they can also be used in different ways and shapes and forms. A lot of what we do with Kinetic is we bring in, we have an internal staff and team, and that can't always be made up of planners. So we bring in people of different categories, and they might be so used to doing X, Y, and Z. But if you sort of take away X and put it in Y, it's the same methodology, it's the same approach, it's the same skill set that they're using. They're just using it on a different sort of platform or for a different sort of medium in that regard.
Yeah. Do you have an example of that? It sounds
Yeah. I mean, if somebody is the person who's really good at being the tech person, organizing files, and getting it all organized and names and files in that regard, they might be the best person to alphabetize the seating charts and get everybody in order and make sure it's all perfectly dialed in, right? Their numbers, they're analytical, they're focused in on that, but instead of it being files, we're just changing it out for something else. Or sometimes the person who's a videographer is super tech focused, they're going to be able to focus in on the sound, the audio, and know the whole hookup that maybe they're the best person to sort of be that speaker liaison, making sure that the presentation works, checking everything, and be more mindful of the way that different files speak together that somebody else might not be.
I love that. Yeah, kind of where it is a team effort a little bit, where it's not everyone's just doing this all the time, but kind of collaborative effort and finding where you have crossover. That's interesting. I love it. So corporate America, plastics. I'm sure most people are learn a lot that I didn't know. But I love how much you still sticks with you. Clearly there's a lot there. So you did that for 5 years, you said?
I don't remember.
Something
For
like
being
that.
honest, I could look it up on my LinkedIn profile.
It doesn't even matter. I'm terrible. Some people, when they give dates, and it was this year. I'm like, how do you want to remember? And it doesn't even matter. So you did that for a while, and then you were doing the events. What was the segue was the next step House of Joy, or did you do both a little bit, or what was that transition
actually, so
period?
I got engaged to my now husband when I was a freshman. I didn't get engaged when I was a freshman. We met when we were at freshman orientation at college. We didn't start dating till between
sweet.
sophomore and junior year when I got back from study abroad in Spain. And we got engaged, we got married, and I started working a week after my honeymoon. I started working for my own wedding planner. I didn't go into it thinking I want to be a wedding planner, but her and I got along really, really well. And it was just sort of a perfect segue for me to start, really the perfect segue for me to get into weddings. The week after my honeymoon, I started working for her, and then I stayed around and I started working. I was still working full time, but working sort of her events on the weekends and whatnot for the next, I want to say 2 to 3 years. And then we had the conversation that went something like, Samantha, this is too much for us to have you come back in town every event. And it would be great to have someone more regularly on the ground who could also take on more of a role. And so I stopped working with her, but she's great. She's a big fan of hers. And she's kind of just become a great mentor for me. And at that point, I was like, I need to do something on my own. So my middle name is Joy. I wanted to keep Joy in my business name in some way, shape, or form. So my business legally is actually Samantha Joy Events. That's what it was when it first started. And then I did that for, 2026 will be my 10 years. So it'll be 9 years this July. So it started that in 2016, while still working full time until I couldn't handle it anymore. And then I stepped down from my corporate job and did at the time it was Samantha Joy Events, full time. And it wasn't until 2 years ago where I changed the name to House of Joy, which was just a better fit for me.
Oh, that's really great. I love that. And then, so you jumped over to that. And then what was was that in the same, what were the first few clients that you were working with other planner? Was it a pretty natural progression, starting your own?
Yeah, I knew I
with your own
liked it so
brand?
much. I liked working for her a ton, and we had talked about how could I join her team full time. It was sort of already an open conversation as far as like if you ever move back to Chicago, like there's a job here. How could we make you move back to Chicago? An important detail is that I grew up in Chicago, worked for her, got married there, but after a couple months after I got married, I moved to Ohio, which is where I live now with my husband, who has a great job. He has a rare job that can only be done in a handful of cities in the entire country. So that's what brought me to Ohio and where
What
I
does
live
he do
now.
if you can?
He's an aerospace engineer.
Oh,
There's only a couple cities in the whole country that actually like do
you
engineering.
gotta
on
take
aerospace.
you just take some junior college classes for that, right? You just like a few,
Yeah, no.
just take a few classes.
No. But anyone who's married to
Like
an
a-
engineer, let's chat. Because I always feel like there's spouses of engineers that it's like a whole nother game. It's just fun.
Oh, that's funny. One of Jessica's, my wife's cousins, he's works for NASA. But my favorite things when we met him and it was like, oh, you're a rocket scientist, like the most like stereotypical like.
Literally what
you're
our
just like,
priest
"Oh,
said
it's
during
rocket
our
science."
ceremony. And
Yeah.
everybody
I
laughed.
was like, oh, it's literally rocket science. You're like, so funny. I just love having conversations and trying to ask about work stuff too, because it totally 99% goes over my head, but I still find it interesting. So I'm like, I don't know really
Yeah.
anything, but I love hearing about things I don't know about.
Yeah.
And it's always like hearing them try to dumb it down, but they're like so much smarter in that field. So it's like, how do they like take all this knowledge?
If we
Try to put it down.
travel,
So-
I think for like the first 3 or 4 years when we traveled together, we had to sit on seats just above or before the wing so that he could like explain how the wings work to me every single time.
I love that. That was really fun. So you guys were in Ohio, and then how much are most of your weddings? Are you split between like destination, local, or like?
Yeah,
I
we're
guess
about
you
60-40. So about 60% is still sort of locally within Ohio, not really like in a particular
great.
city, but
Like-
Ohio based. And then we do about 40% destination, sort of mostly greater Midwest. Depends on how you sort of slice and dice it. But I've been part of producing events in 16 different states. So just to kind of,
Yeah.
my goal
Yeah,
is to be
that's-
part of all
which I
50 by
know-
the time I turn 50. So that's just a
Ooh,
little,
I
a
like
little
that
goal,
goal.
a little goal that's out
All right.
there.
Well, taking it back when you started Samantha Joy Events, then House of Joy, what did you have like a vision of what it would look like in a couple of years? Like, did you have a goal in mind? Were you just kind of like, how was your like? Does that make sense? Like, I guess like when you got into it, did you have a vision of what you wanted it to be?
I think I had a loose
or-
vision. I sort of grew up in the way that my family sort of ran when we were older or when I was younger. I should rephrase. I'm the middle of 5 and there's always stuff going on and always
family
things
too.
going on. So I just kind of got used to planning events for my family and doing our vacations and all those things. But there's a couple of really great influences on my life growing up. There's a amazing electronics store by where I grew up, and there's always this sign on the wall that says the answer is yes to any and all reasonable requests. And I sort of grew up a little bit with that mentality because that bled over into the corporate company that I was part of. They were extremely customer service focused. It wasn't just here's products that we have, buy them, make them work. It was they did a lot of customization. So they really used their product line as sort of the launch pad into customizing and tweaking everything. And I sort of have, in a way, adopted that. That's sort of just ingrained in who I am, that like, let's start off with the essential questions, but then let's really customize it and focus in on like who you are, what your story is. And in the corporate world, that was like, what is the application of your product? Who are your customers? How is it being used? What are other sort of benefits and techniques and things that they're using that they want the material to have? And for me, I adopt that into the event store phrase being like, what's the story of your life? What is that we want to do? And starting off, you start off small. I think most planners out there know that you sort of start off with event management. You just kind of want to be a coordinator for somebody. So you only have 10% of influence, really, ways you can do that.
Yeah.
And it starts to grow and grow and grow until you're into full planning. And so I sort of took the opportunities as they were provided to me to sort of add influence, add ideas, share. And if people didn't take them, they didn't take them. That was totally fine. But it got me a lot more comfortable in my own skin of sharing ideas that I had for people that maybe were or weren't solicited from the get-go.
I love that. And so you took, what was that you were saying about the like slowly getting more influence into the events, right? Am I hearing that right?
Yeah.
Of like
Yeah.
taking it. So from the coordination to like, was that your goal of like be able to more like, I guess you start I love that you're from a big family. We have 7 kids in our family, so it's a totally different. I feel like similar to the engineer
Yes,
spouse. It's a different understanding,
it
just because life's
is.
a little different. So like planning of just like creating like experiences and stuff, and like having an idea. Like, was that where you had a vision of moving more towards like that full service planning, where you can like take someone's like kind of rough like core vision, like you're saying, and how do we like translate that to an event where
Yeah,
it's like maybe they
the
don't even
goal
have all
was
the
always to
pieces to know
do
what they want. Yeah.
Yeah, the goal was always to do full planning because that's what I was doing with the planner that I was working with. I was just her day of
Mm-hmm.
staff. So I
Yeah.
could ask her the questions of what was it like to go through the whole process and what was it like and what do
Mm-hmm.
they pull out from, and quickly sort of understood that like this was a better place for me to be. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of what you learn as a bride, maybe going through your own planning process is you're like, oh, I saw this from A to Z. I saw the logistics and I saw the design, and the interplay that those two have is a really, really fun experience. And when you sort of start off, you're just like, great, I'm just the timeline logistics master. But when you do that and you master that really, really well, then people trust you enough to give you the design elements. And so pulling
Mm.
that back and starting from the beginning of just dropping in ideas, then my creative partner saw me in a different way. They started advocating for me. So then I took on more partial planning. Then I took on more partial planning and design, and it grew into really just doing mostly full planning clients.
Yeah. What was your drive to like want to do the full planning?
I think for me, it's about seeing things through fully. I
Mm-hmm.
don't do I don't do half-assed really well, or if that's not allowed on the
I love
podcast.
it.
I don't half
No, that's allowed.
have anything really well.
That's gonna be the title of the show.
I don't. Those who know me kind of know that I will go all in, that I'll research it all, that I'll figure it all
Mm-hmm.
out. And I think part of that for me was really about seeing the full picture and
Mm-hmm.
being a partner or a companion in the journey with my clients, and being able to be an
Mm.
advocate for them from the very beginning to the very end. Because what you find very quickly in any sort of partial planning, partial design is that you only can partially support somebody. You only
Mm.
get part of the information, and that to me was really hard. When I knew that there was more information that I could have, and if I had it, then I could make a bigger impact. I wanted that. And I
Mm.
wanted to make more of an impact on people. I wanted to be more of a service provider. I wanted to take more of the stress, more of the workload off of my clients. But if I
Mm-hmm.
only have part of the picture, I can only do part of the work. And I didn't want that. I wanted to be fully in. I wanted to fully adapt with my clients to what they're doing, how they're taking shape. One of my favorite stories I tell inquiry clients as far as like what that means to us is I had this groom, Chase, who stayed up really late at night and liked to watch, I don't know on what app, but he stayed up watching musicians, and he found this
Mm-hmm.
electric violinist who played on the streets of Vegas. And he called me on my ride between something. He's like, I've got something urgent. And I was like, what's up? And he's like, so I found this electric violinist, and I would really like, this is like 2.5 months before their wedding, I would really like if he could come in and he could play while people are unloading through the valet, and then
Mm-hmm.
play people essentially down to the ceremony location, and then play them to cocktail hour and then during dinner. So he was sort of this transitional music, this sort of,
Yeah.
because he was mobile, fully transitional player.
Yeah.
And I
That's
said,
really
great,
cool.
no
Like his thought
problem.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very cool. But I wasn't the type of person who wanted to come back and be like, okay, great. Well, this is a change in scope. A year ago,
Yeah.
you never had this idea, so I never quoted you for
Mm-hmm.
this work. I wanted to be
Yeah.
able to adapt with them, and be able
Mm-hmm.
to sort of say yes to any and all reasonable requests. And that's what we did. I said, great, give me the information. I'll track him down. When somebody who works at night, you got to track him down at the odd hours of the night. But we
Mm-hmm.
flew him in. I met with him. We took care of it basically. And that was really,
Yeah.
really important to me, to provide that level of service to my clients and not say, hey, we offer A through Z. You're only going to get A through Z. If you go beyond A
Yeah.
through Z, you know, it's going to be a change in scope, or you're going to owe us something. That's just not
Yeah.
an exchange I want to have.
You're. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you
Not that
like
I
taking
can't
that
have it.
step?
It's just not the experience I want my clients to have.
Yeah. Like how do you describe like what does like impact, like what is like value, like how do you define value in your words?
How
What
do
is
I find value? I think providing value to someone can take a couple different shapes.
mm-hmm.
And I think end of the day, for the most part nowadays, it's about giving them time back in their life. Because I think time is
Mm,
one of our most valuable resources. And if I can
mm,
take the stress back, if I can take the workload back from them, I'm providing them something, the most, non-renewable resource that we all have, which is time. And I think that's invaluable into the way you do it. And I think you can create added value by the process in which you do it, which creates a really comfortable space for people to share their story, which creates a really relatable way for people to share their story, which creates a really sort of down to earth, humbling way for people to tell their story. And I think that that's really beautiful in the way that we approach it.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. How do you like? What is that driving force? Because like I resonate a lot with what you said about, and I love like hearing it through a story with specifics. It's really helpful. Like, okay, this ask thought through, but you're like, okay, this is more work, and like your default. Some people like default be like, oh, like they're gonna take it defensively because it's like, oh, like this wasn't part of it, and it's like, and that's just like the first. There's almost like all these fork in the roads, and it's like that's like the first deviation. We're just like,
Yeah.
oh, I want to like take care of my client. How do I do so? Okay, what's realistic? What's not? Like, I need to make sure like obviously the business runs, but your first default was to go, how do I take care of him and just make his life easier and
Yeah.
as painless? Like, where does that come from for you?
I think it just comes from being, I think a lot of it comes from growing up. I mean, my dad owned a
Mm-hmm.
company, watching him grow it and be such customer first service focused. I think working at the
Mm-hmm.
corporate company, confirmed that a little bit more, and them just being so customer service focused, that really comes back to time and time again for me, the common thread has been people and their story.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you focus in on their story, the more you realize that there is no such thing as normal, that everyone has a different unique approach. Yeah, you can group us in similar ways. I mean, a lot of us went to universities with other like-minded people, but at the end of the day, those like-minded people are also different in the way that they choose to live it and breathe it. And
Mm-hmm.
and for me, it's people have sort of always been, when I really look back and dig through everything, it's really been about people and serving
Mm-hmm.
people in a more focused way.
Yeah, I love what you said, like the client story. Like, I want to break that down more of like how you'd, like, what do you mean by that? Like focusing in on their story, because like everyone has a story, and like, what does that mean practically, like in the way it shapes your mindset when you
Yeah.
work with clients?
I'll actually share in sort of how it shapes House of Joy in our process, because I think that's a really,
Hmm.
really great
Yeah.
tangible example. So the tagline of House of Joy is inspired by people. And a lot of what
Hmm.
I do in life is truly inspired by people. I could talk to people and their stories and do what you're doing all
Hmm.
day long. It's really a great, beautiful, it fills my cup. And at House of Joy, the way we look at it when we meet with our clients is I want to get to know anything and everything there is about them. I want to know how it is that they're hosting their friends and family. I want to know what fills their cup and what would they rather do hours on end. I would love a really beautiful cocktail at a place that has subtle music that's slightly upbeat, and I want to be able to talk in a comfortable environment where I'm not yelling over the music, but where I can talk for
Hmm.
hours. Like, to me, that's something you say yes. You ask me, and I will say yes 99% of the time, because that's a space that fills me up, fills my cup, right? But in order for me to design an event for them, I have to know that information about them. I want to know where they vacation, how they vacation, and to me, those are the stories of their life, right? If I look at really the whole book of my client, I need to be able to be read into all the various chapters. How do they host for the holidays with family? How do they host when they're not with
Hmm.
their family? How do they get hosted by family? What does that look like if somebody else is hosting? Where do they vacation, and why do they vacation to those places? What meaning do those places have for them? And or does meaning matter when they vacation to places? Are they truly somebody who rests and relaxes on vacation, or are they more like me, where it's just a bigger, better, more difficult adventure when they're on vacation? Do they have, do they have a big family? Do they have a small family? Is it a close knit family? If it's a close knit family, how does that close knit family celebrate, right? Are they, a bunch of people with shenanigans? Do they tell stories? Do they like, jazz each other up and have sort of a little bit of fun with it? Or are they all sort of deep into conversation? Are they big card game players, right? To me, that's all about how you can shape someone's welcome party, to their brunch, to their dinner, to their celebration, how you can help them find the destination that matches them the most, to really anything else. Rather than hoping that that person knows all the answers about themselves. I don't think that that's fair to ask a planner to know the answers about, I don't think it's not, I don't think it's appropriate for you to ask a planner to immediately
Hmm.
know all of those things about you. and for you to know
Yeah.
them. But it's okay for me to ask and get to know all of those things and sort of show you the mirror back and say, this is what I'm getting and this is what I think we can create for you. And that feels like it's a
Yeah.
reflection of who you are. But I can't do that if I don't know your story, right? I think so much about what you're finding out from me through this episode is the stories that shape my life and the value that those have and the impact they have in how I'm presenting my life. And I think we
Yeah.
can all move through life accepting those, showing light to them, or the ones that maybe don't serve us well, we can just put behind us and move in a different way because we don't want that to be a reflection on our current day.
I love that. I think that's really good where I think so many people get caught up in their business. Like when you're focusing on working, either you're stuck working in your business where you're just like the one delivering everything and you're just like, that's like one burnout. But then you can get to this, if you are at the stage where you can work on your business, the mindset's like, okay, like it's very like selfish centric sometimes, like, or it's, and that's like a harsh word to say, but I think sometimes we think of like, okay, how can we like grow revenue? We have a revenue goal or we have like whatever that is. And those are like, I think they're good, but when people get stuck trying to grow their business, I think sometimes we do start from a place of service, but then you're just trying to figure out how do we optimize or grow. And that can almost what ends up self-sabotaging from what you're saying, where to be able to serve our clients well and to provide value, it's understanding who are they, what's their story, and then taking your creative skill set, whatever it's your business or whatever you offer. And that's where you have your gifting, where it sounds like someone may know like, hey, yeah, obviously, where do you go on vacation? Do you have a big family? Like those are all like easy questions that doesn't take any thought. It's just like, here's my camera roll. Like, you know what I mean? There's a lot of things you could just like there's no thought to it versus if you say like, describe to me how you want the atmosphere to feel at the cocktail hour for the welcome party. You'd be like,
Right.
You could, but like from what you're saying, I'm hearing is you're asking deeper questions of who someone is as like a person and their history and all of that. And then taking your gifts as in this case, like an event planner or, whatever is it, if you're a photographer, whatever that looks like, and understand taking what they hired you for with your own like unique vision, but then be able to like mirror that back to them where you're actually focusing on what they want, just like highlighting those areas, which is very different than just trying to tell people what they want.
Right.
But it starts with listening.
As a business owner too, you have to sort of do the same thing, and it can be beneficial if you have an accountability group or people who are moving in the same, community of people for you to bounce those ideas off of. But we have so much media coming at us all the time that I think sometimes who we truly are can get lost in the mix of what the narrative is of the content that we're absorbing. And if you're constantly hearing these different narratives of this or that, or, your feed is filled with influencers, suddenly you're going to think you need to be a wardrobe influencer or a travel influencer. But I think sometimes when you put those voices to pause and you have an open conversation, you can hear yourself, not just in what you're talking, but in what your brain is now hearing you say back. And it reaffirms how you want to be in different spaces or what you don't want to be in different spaces, right? So from a client perspective, that's hearing all of those things that they say out loud, and as the planner watching them and saying, does that feel good to you? Like, is what you just said, does that like truly feel like it's a line? And because you can tell their body language just changed. And they're like, no, actually, like I thought that's what I wanted, but it's always just like been in my head and I have a bunch of these pictures saved. And I think, okay, well, let's go through those pictures because there's a lot in a picture, right? Like there's a reason I sit in front of this frame. I sit in front of this wall. I like to see what people notice behind me because there's a lot it tells people, right? A lot more than sitting in front of a white backdrop. And so I think when you can spin it back, you can hear them say, oh, actually, that doesn't feel good. When you look at the picture, you can find out that it's just a particular flower, or it's the way the chairs were arranged, or it's the silverware that they liked, not really anything else, but that's what their mind singularly saved. And you can begin to distill those things out. I think similar is true for a business owner in that when we really sort of distill out what it is that we liked about something, maybe it's that we liked that 3 of our friends just started a podcast. But when you really dig into, you're like, oh, nope, podcasting's not for me. But what you really like is that they've created a platform in which they can share their voice, and you've been holding back on sharing your own voice. How can you go forth and do that and find what is in alignment with them? You get a lot more clarity in who you are, what your business is, and how it needs to move through different shapes and environments.
Yeah. It sounds like
It's all about story.
Is like, being aware of like, we're always like creating stories and trying to solve problems, right? Like subconsciously, like we're always, and you can either give yourself like a big problem, like you're going to be doing it. So what are you taking in? And I think you kind of touched on it. And I'd like to know more, like, especially social media and all that stuff. Like, and in the industry, we tend to follow other people in the industry. So I find a lot of the times what we're taking in is just what other people are doing, which I'm all for inspiration.
Yeah.
Or what other people are doing in their business. But I think sometimes what can be refreshing is like, you can kind of get lost in what other people are doing, but everyone's gonna have their own approach. And like, it's a reflection of what their clients wanted versus maybe like clearing up some room to be able to listen to either your clients and what they're wanting. And then also what is it that like, what direction do you want your business to go to versus if like you're saying, if you're just taking this like overload of information of what other people are doing, and you're just going to like by default just start doing that. Like you're saying, like the podcast or whatever that is.
It's not going to feel in alignment. You're going to find some sort of internal friction. You're not going to be able to see yourself in the mirror being like, okay, my body moved a little bit differently. But you find that you can just be a little bit more aligned when you kind of sink into what your values are, what you want to do, and how it truly like aligns with what your clients are or what your sort of core mission is and what you want to be known for.
Yeah. Is there any habits or like things that you've like tweaked in your even just day-to-day life that's helped you like be grounded more?
Well, I don't sit still very well. So I do this thing, I don't know if it has a technical name, but I call it habit replacement. And so I've been trying to actually work less and to be smarter about working. And so I try to do a couple like household chores in the morning, which has really helped me at the end of the day. So I'll see my kids off. I'll go for a walk with my dog. I spilled iced tea on my pants last week, so I was scrubbing out a stain on my pants this morning. Might be processing laundry or something like that in the morning, and it helps me go into my day to my desk a little bit later, which is nice. But I'm also ending my day knowing that like, oh, I've accomplished a couple things which feel really good, or I'm doing laundry throughout the day and I'm switching it out a couple times and it helps me get up from my desk. So I try to sort of replace the habits around work and doing things for work with replacing it with a habit for my personal life. So it's more art on the weekends. I'm gardening more. If I feel like I'm drawn to the computer in some way, I try to have other things up on the screen first. I've gotten really big into gardening. So I have like a whole Canva doc of where I've put experimental plants and seeing how they grow and don't grow before I move them elsewhere. And things like that. So for me, replacement habits have been just a huge piece in changing the way that I do stuff, especially when you hear every week is like, you need to have 1 hour for this and 1 hour for your Instagram. And you're like, great, if I do all these 1 hours, when am I actually working? The replacement habits have been great of just like, okay, I'm just going to do one little thing, or we're just doing it once a month, have helped.
In which ways has it helped? Like, have you seen things shift in your business or like the way that you do show up? Or
it's more so for me, the biggest ones that I've worked on are things that what I want to work on my business rather than working for my business, right? So it's really allowed me to create more space in terms of habits for two things, because I've done it really for my personal side and be able to do more and have more free weekends instead of weekends that are full of chores and sheets and things like that. It's allowed me to get more household chores and more general to-dos done during the week, which is really, really great. So I have more free time with my kids and hobbies and things like that I want to be doing. And then also from a business standpoint, it's allowed me to be really a lot smarter with my time and how my time and where my time is being used, and identify very quickly, this is not the best use of my time. This is not how I value my time. So I am learning to outsource smaller segments, be more creative with how my outsourcing is being done. Something as little as just someone writing my blogs. I have a team member who just does that. Very, singularly, very simple, but she writes 2 blogs a month, and we have developed our own flow of information, the process around it. It's taken the time off my calendar. It's put it into somebody else's calendar who really enjoys doing it. But I now have a really strategic way of how to get that information, manage the information, and make that process work for me. So from the personal side and the professional side of focusing in on what I'm doing and doing more of that big picture work, I think not necessarily every, I shouldn't group everyone in that regard, but I think there's an evolution that happens as businesses grow where you have to shift from the manager and the doer to a little bit more of the business developer mindset, in that there has to be rooms that you're in. There has to be relationships that you're developing. And if you don't create the time and the space to do that, to research it, to travel, to have those conversations, to follow up on those relationships, you're not developing your business for what could be the next stage of growth.
Yeah, I love. Okay, there's a couple things I want to come back to, but
Yeah.
before, while we're on this side, what is the one activity you're seeing right now at the stage in your business has the biggest impact? You only had 1 hour a week.
Outsourcing.
But I mean, like once you outsource, because I think some people, I want to get back to the actual outsourcing because I do think a lot
Yeah.
of people get hung up on that. Whether it's like, how do I like physically and what's expectations for it to maybe not go right the first time and all that stuff. But once you have the time freed up, let's like, we're going to skip one step ahead and then go back. You have it outsourced and I really,
I've outsourced it. What am I
it's
doing
on
with the
autopilot.
hour that I bought back?
Now it's like, what do I do with my, like Ricky Bobby, what do I do with my hands? It's the, it's like, what, if you have that and you have that freedom now where it's like, okay, what is that needle? Like maybe how do you identify what that is? And then what is it for you right now?
Yeah. In a way, are you saying, what am I doing with the hour that I bought back by outsourcing?
Yeah. Like once you buy back the hour, I guess
Yeah.
how do you even to figure out what that hour is? And then like the practical, what is it right now? But like, how do you even start? Like, is there like a practice you go through or like mentally or like, how do you
No,
usually...
but if you find one, I'd love to know what that practice is. I think
there is. Oh, wait. I have a book for you then after, but
Okay. I think what I'm finding is that, and they kind of go a little hand in hand. So I know you said we'll jump forward or backwards, but I think what I'm learning is how to outsource and how to identify the items, because I think very conventionally coming from corporate, it is enough work has to pile up to be a 40-hour work job. And in reality, that's not what it has to be anymore. There are so many colleagues who are experts at things that I can outsource someone to make reels. I have a young girl who comes in a couple days a month, and I have all these folders set aside, and she makes all these reels for me. I'm finding that when I focus in on the viewpoint that I need to have as the owner and the business developer and the voice of all the brands, that's where I have to be, that the work that I don't need to be doing, I can outsource. And when I get that time back, what I'm finding is that what I'm spending my time doing is doing two things. I'm doing more business development, finding more rooms to be in, more relationships to develop, getting to know those people, pitching new creative and collaborative ideas for them, which is a huge part in, I think, growing my businesses. And then I think the second is I'm actually doing it more introspectively, is I'm building SOPs, I'm building really, really solid processes and workflows, because something that's important to me is I want to be able to travel and do whatever I want to do and not be stuck to my desk. The corporate conventional side to me is like, this is my happy place. I want all my screens, and I like that. And I like a good, manila file folder with me. I still bring them with me. I'm a paper person. But being able to work on the way that all my files are organized, the way that all of our stuff is done by content creators, like labeling everything for quick, making sure that the way I've got the system organized isn't just organized for my brain, but organized for anyone on our team. And so it's a lot of training, it's a lot of process development, workflow optimization, things like that, so that we can bring in more team members easily. As I outsource each thing, it sort of goes hand in hand. I'm giving something to somebody else.
Yeah.
We're refining and working on that process in hand in hand. And sometimes those processes ricochet to me to do, okay, I need this 2, 3, 4 thing upstream in my process to happen, in order for that downstream thing I've outsourced to be even better than what it was before.
So like once you identify that area, it sounds like you're, okay, now that I've been doing it, it's all in my head. How do I, for an SOP, like, or if someone doesn't know, standard operating procedure.
Yeah.
If you're basically just documenting what's in your head, and if someone comes in to do this, okay, how are they going to do that? So it's, and a lot of times, like for us, like when we brought on like team members, like on our team to help like manage email, it's like, okay, how do you respond to a lead? I'm like, well, we just like, well, it depends on what planner it is, and depends on where it is and what day of the year, and like all these things that felt like we couldn't, but then we, like you said, once you start documenting it, you're like, oh, okay, now it is repeatable, that somebody else can take it and aligns with your goal of like being able to travel and stuff.
Right.
What was the other thing along
And
those
I think
lines?
anytime there's a part of friction for me, I look a lot at friction. Anytime that there's something of friction for me, if it's a task I'm doing 3 times over the course of something, I try to figure out how to only do it once. Like, how can I improve the process so that I don't have to do it again because it's so much friction that I just don't ever want to do it? Or how can I do it so that it's always there? So we changed over our paperwork this year, and went from a a regular document to instead a spreadsheet. And so now it's this massive workbook and everything is quick. I'm not opening up other files. I'm switching between tabs, or tabs are coded so that if you enter in one spot, it's pulling the information from every other slot, which is really, really, really nice. And then the information goes out to our team and they have all of that same information. It's actually something I tried with Kinetic first. It worked really well for Kinetic in that format that I brought it back over to House of Joy saying, okay, I've had this paperwork for almost 10 years. I'm going to change it. So there are some adjustments for it, but any part of friction to me is a great indicator. And I should say, I've learned that for myself and how I function is a great indicator, a great sign that there's opportunity for outsourcing or an opportunity for process improvement.
I love that. And I, at least for me, I'll speak is sometimes I'll deal with like an inefficient thing because I'm doing it myself. And it's kind of like the unorganized side where I'm like, oh, it's just working. But if I'm going to pay somebody else to do it, I'm like, that is not efficient. I don't want to pay somebody else to do this inefficient thing. And it can help you then identify that friction too, I think sometimes, where it's like, well, I wouldn't want to be paying a team to do it this like backwards way. Let's create a system. And now it's like, okay, we have a system. And now I'm like, whoa, I have this time back to be able to work on that.
If you feel like there's a blind spot, a great way to do it too is to hire someone, take them through it, and then be like, okay, what about that doesn't work, or what doesn't work with the way you would do it, and they can, as long as you create a space where they feel comfortable sharing, they can very easily be like, yeah, why would you do 3 steps when you could just do it this way from the beginning and it's all in one spot? And you're like, great, done. Like, make it happen.
Yeah, totally.
You know, I love it because old dog can learn new tricks.
I love it because I'm pretty bad at making SOPs, but now people on our team, like their job is to make SOPs. So I'll record like a Loom video or something of just doing it a few times. And then they can actually be like, well, one, you're doing things that are stupid. Okay, we'll fix that. And then they can actually document it in a good way, which is like the next step of outsourcing. But to the side of working on the business, you said like getting in rooms, talking to people. The book I was going to say, have you read The One Thing?
I think it's on my list. It's like red, right? It's like with the text. Yeah, I think I have it.
Red and white, I think.
I think it's on my nightstand.
Gary Keller, I think, and Jay Papasan, like they wrote it. And I think at some point in the book, they call it the focusing question. And it's a really good practical tool that we use a lot. That's just, what is the one thing I can do such by doing it would make everything else easier or unnecessary? So when you're in that point where like, okay, now I have time back, it helps if you have like a bigger, they also talk about goal setting, like a someday goal. You can have like a 10-year goal, a 5-year goal, and you can kind of work back. And then you can even have a today's goal. But you first start with a really big and work your way back, because otherwise you take one step in the wrong direction. It's only one step, but you start going the wrong way, right? So you want to first make sure it aligns with what you want, where it's cool hearing you say like, okay, I want to like be able to work from my computer anywhere. I don't want it to be like tied to the desk, and like maybe breaking those like mindset things of being corporate. But having that where it aligns, like, well, I can't be working this way if what I want to be is over here. So it helps you just kind of like take a step back. But I like how he simplifies it down, where a lot of times there's going to be all these processes or different like things you can do to figure out something, but it's just not very practical, versus he always like get it down to one thing. Yeah. That by doing that, it's going to free up time to get to the next thing. And then you do it again. It's like for us, I think it was a couple of years ago, but we finally realized, okay, we're spending 80% of our time editing. It was like, well, what is the one thing that we could do by doing it would make everything else easier? Well, I was like, well, we need to hire an editor. And then it was like, okay, well, how do we even hire an editor? Okay, well, we need to like reach out to hiring agencies. You know what I mean? So it's like, okay, what do I need to do? What's the one thing? I need to send an email. So it just kind of steps it back. And then you're like, it clears everything out from having a huge to-do list. And he talks about it in the book, where when he was like talking about coaching clients, where he'd be like, all right, here's like 10 things for the week. And they do everything but like 2 or 3 that happen to be like the most important things. And then you go to like 3. And then finally he's like, here's the one thing you do this week. And then like results skyrocketed for his clients that he was like coaching, because they were actually just focusing on get this one thing done first, and then everything else can take care of the rest. But it's a cool thing to kind of.
I like that, because we use a question within House of Joy for our clients, from a concierge methodology of like, how do you define where that boundary really is? And our question is, if I wasn't here, is it something the client would be responsible for? And if the answer is yes, then it's our job. And if the answer is no, then it's not our job. right? So it's like
That's
if
interesting.
if
Yeah.
I wasn't here, would the client still be responsible for figuring out the beauty schedule and passing the beauty schedule out to the entire wedding party? Yes, that's our job then. Like that's a lift we're going to make. If I wasn't here, would and there's a boundary within like family, right? So like if I wasn't here, would the client still have to tell their mom? Like yes, the client still has to tell their mom. That's their mom. Like those are some interrelation stuff that we still point to, right, in that regard. But it's a great sort of boundary for us to be like, nope, that's not our job. Like there are questions that vendors might ask us that we're just like, that's not okay. That's outside our scope and our realm of what we're going to do. So that's one, but it's, I like this bigger business development thought that I'm going to, that'll be my next podcast or not podcast. That'll be my next book.
It's a good question. Along those lines, cause I like because naturally sometimes when there's something that falls outside of that, right? In this situation where it's like, okay, that doesn't actually, the answer is no. I have a very hard time saying no to things or no to people. But a lot of times saying no is a really powerful thing for your business. And like, especially if we're talking about like making room for more and like finding ways to grow further. How do you speak to like times that you've like had to say no, like a hard, like something that you ended up, it was difficult, but you had to say no, and how it turned into growth? Because I forget what quote it was, but like realizing that every time you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else, which is helpful for me to just realizing, okay, if I take on this extra like responsibility that really I shouldn't be, doesn't align with what needs done, whether it's something that is on our team or this project that really isn't a good fit. Like there's so many different ways you could slice it, but what are ways that you've intentionally had to like prune back, whether in business or personal, to be able to like say yes to the more important things?
I love that you use the word prune because I think of a lot of things right now as a tree analogy. And
I'm glad you like analogies too.
Gosh, I've been told I should write like an analogy metaphor book like more times than I can hear. It's probably what I should do. That and a box of conversation cards.
Oh.
Yeah. The questions I can come up with sort of always I call them fire starters. So you sort of asked, what is it that as you intentionally say no, how do you create that habit? How do you begin to develop that habit essentially? Right.
Yeah.
I will be transparent in that it's something I'm always learning to do and learning to do better. But I think what I have found has helped me the most is really look at, there's sort of a duality for me in that I have to look at the big picture and the far off destination. And then I have to look at the immediacy of what those smaller steps could be into getting there, right? And so I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. And so I like to know early enough on when something's going to happen. I try to advocate if I've heard a whispering of an event that somebody's hoping I go to, like, just send me the save the day. Like, I don't care about the rest of the details. I just want to know, like, save the afternoon or the morning or whatever it is, because then I can do it. But I think sometimes it's also, I should back this up in a way. I worked with a brand coach a couple years ago. And it was a brand coach from the perspective of a personal brand coach. And so one of the things that we worked through, we worked through a lot, but it was identifying rooms, auditing the room, looking at who the people are that are showing up in that room. What do those people stand for? How are those people moving through that room? And if it's a room I identify that I want to be back in, and a room I identify that I want to grow in. So a great example is like at a conference. Go to the conference, identify the conference. Is it a room I want to speak in? How does their speaker process look like? What is that? What are you finding from other people? And is it a space that like I feel like is in alignment with my brand? I think from a brand perspective, the thing for me that I've sort of had to distill through and in a way worked backwards, because I think of everything that I do for a long time as individual silos and who am I showing up today? I have since sort of brought that back to me that at the basis of everything that I do is Samantha. Like I am myself and I am doing what I do through various lenses. I can show up in a room as more than one company, more than one entity. And when I change the focus as I'm showing up as Samantha, I'm showing up primarily as that. And it's really, really helpful. So I think in saying no to things, it's keeping a reminder of what is I'm going to, what can I garner a little strategically from that experience. I like to ask the guest list of things if I'm going to it specifically. But if it's also like an email outreach of, do you want to be written up in this? Or can we get you a quote from this? I am a challenge person. I like to try something for the first time every single time. I think that's the only real way to know whether you like a piece of food or you don't. It's the same way for like knowing if you like to do some networking event or not, is to do it all once. And so for me, distilling that out through my values and the time commitment and the alignment of what that brand means next to mine is really helpful to me. Still an exercise that I'm working. It is not an easy habit for me to form. It's a constant, but I keep a couple post-it notes underneath my monitor that are a great reminder when something comes up, because it's hard for me to ignore an email. It's hard for me to say no. It's hard for me to just not be part of that something for someone. But I think there's also a way that you can be part of something or support someone without it having to be like a hard no and closing off that opportunity. Because I think there's a lot of ways that people can grow alongside you separately and kind of come back into your life. So I like to do soft no's and say like, hey, this isn't a great time for us, or this just isn't in alignment with what we're trying to achieve and our goals for this year. We'd love for you to keep us on the list and bring us back, ask us again next year. Different things like that can help in terms of not being such a hard no and cutting something off in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. You touched on a few things. So we talked about, you sound like you're talking about back to kind of the corporate, the silos of like kind of trying to fit yourselves and like different versions of yourselves, and how you found like as you've grown to kind of realize, okay, like the same Samantha is showing up doing the laundry is at an event, which is at Santa Barbara, like just understanding that. And then from there, it sounds like you have like your core person of like your identity. And then you have like your values that you're kind of like with that. Now you're like, okay, Samantha, these are like her identities or values. And then from there, use that as like a test almost to like, okay, you have this like engagement, or like, okay, like, hey, I want you to come on the podcast with me. And you're like, okay, does this align? You're going to go through like, does this align with, am I like tracking right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think at the podcast is a great example, right? Do you want to be on the podcast? Okay, great. Who's your audience? Does your audience align with the people that I want to be seen in front of? What is the degree of fit that is? What is it that you want to talk about? Is it something that I want to be seen alongside my personal brand? Is it something that if people found me, I would also want to be seen around my other brands? And to be seen within that, you sort of have to distill through those questions. I think a lot like the book you said, right? The one thing, you start with the one thing, but there's different qualifiers that come after that are the second and the third and the fourth thing of, does it make sense for me to use my time? What's the return on the investment? Could it lead to something else? Is it a stepping stone of achievement to get to a main stage, right? Is there something that we need to do in order to be a proof statement that people value your word, right? I think it goes through the brand, the personal brand, as well as like the more corporate style brand.
Yeah, no, I love that. And how do you say, like, I think with the impact of making sure it aligns like with the audience, like, I think like coming down to like kind of like serving and like how you bring value to others. Cause I think so much of the way that you like run all like the different brands is like focusing on like what's the impact you're having on others, and is that bringing them value, right? And understanding them too. So like how does that like align? Because I think sometimes people can feel like, oh, it's just like I'm just trying to figure out what's good for me, when in reality like saying no is usually to free you up to focus your energy on what you're trying to do, like what you feel missionally of like, hey, I'm serving these people to have this outcome for them, to have this like transformation. Like, does that make sense? Like, I think sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm just doing this like selfishly, versus, okay, there's like this people that I feel like I have this gifting that I'm really good at, and I can help people get from here to there very easy. Like that's like by nature. So instead of trying to focus on something that's like you're not necessarily good at, or like, do you know what I'm saying? Like how that kind of like help filter, like, I guess like for your values, like, would you go into your values maybe?
I think of it more so of like, is it providing me an opportunity to share my mission? Like, what is it that I want people to know about me? And it can feel very self-centered, but to me, it's more like, am I saying yes to opportunities that are going to help me further my mission? And I worked with a core value coach, and so we worked through what are Samantha Leenheer's core values. What of those core values do we work through that present themselves the most through each brand? So there's like a subset. And then it wasn't until I listened to a Brene Brown podcast or her book, actually, I listened to one of her books, and she sort of brought up that everyone has one central core value, and that core value is really the stem or the seed that all of the others come from. And that's what really brought me into realizing that like my number one core value is connection. And connection can be for lots of different audiences, right? I think I have 3 different audiences, but you show up and you present yourself in different ways in each of those. And I want to make sure that at any room I'm in, any opportunity I'm saying yes to, and I think that those can be both big and small. It can be as big as going to like a week-long conference and giving somebody a whole week of your life, to a podcast, to just putting, writing an email back. How can I make an impact and share what it is that I want people to see from me and gain from me in big and little ways, but that has to be worth my time and my energy, which sounds really selfish, but it's not. It's about making an impact, and your impact has to be in places that it's of value. And when you kind of, like you said, when you make the one wrong step, it's only one and it seems really easy, and you can correct one, but it's a lot harder when you go down the wrong path to find your way back to the original path that you need to be in. There's usually a lot more work involved. And so I think of it through that lens of what impact can I make with my mission, and how can my mission show up in different ways and forms so that people feel impacted by it.
Do you have like a mission statement? Because I know you said your core value is connection.
I
but do you have like can I hear it?
I have a couple. I'll see. I usually keep it up. Let me see if it's. I have not memorized it as much as I would like to say that I've memorized it.
When you have three between the different, because also I think it's helpful that you do have three between, because we also like for our different companies, like brands, we have like my core, but then it's also different because there's different people involved in each business too. So it's like an interesting.
Yeah. So with my coach, I worked through a mission, a vision, and then a philosophy. So my personal mission is to inspire conversation and curiosity, to create environments where all people can share their stories and experiences to connect in deep, meaningful ways.
I love that.
And so I have a different version for House of Joy and also for Kinetic for how it presents to those clients and that sort of subset of a mission. So
I love that. What do you mind sharing the other two?
Yeah. So Kinetic Experiences mission is to create experimental events for wedding and event leaders who want to discover more about themselves, to create deep relationships, cultivate a supportive community, and define success on their terms. And then my mission for House of Joy. So House of Joy's mission is to design and plan events and experiences that are deeply inspired by the people they celebrate, to clients that desire to explore beyond the beautiful and into the meaningful.
I love they all have that common thread of like getting down to like connection with people and like having more purpose behind it, not just like all the other things.
Right. It's the same central thread, just being presented in a different framework. I always say the analogy of like a piece of art. It's the same piece of art. It just needs a different framework to fit in different people's homes.
Yeah. No, I love that. That is really sweet. I think it's cool, like hearing, how you've been, was there a time before you had these that like you felt like you were hitting a wall? Like whether it's before Kinetic, even like, I would love to hear like what was, because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, where maybe they left corporate or they never had, like we never worked corporate jobs. We just went straight in creative, but like, which is a whole nother topic. But how I think you get to that point, it's like maybe, and also it depends on family. Like everyone has, or friends are like, you're getting this wedding thing, like good for you, or create, especially if you're like a photographer or creative, where it doesn't seem like, is that a real job? And you're like, no, there's some people that are pretty successful at this. But so you do that, maybe like, okay, you break 6 figures and you do something where it's like, okay, like, if that just seemed as like a ceiling or some sort of like mark of success, but then from there you're like, it doesn't maybe feel like what you thought, and then it kind of hits this, could be burnout, and it could be anywhere around, like obviously it's not a hard number, but I think where it's like what you maybe thought was going to be success. But for you, was there like a time that you felt that and you're kind of stuck, we're not sure where to go next, if that makes sense? Like you hit up some level of success, but you weren't sure like what does the next step look like?
Yeah, I think for me, the journey that I see in entrepreneurship is that you create this goal, this sort of view of what your big hit is, right? Your big goal, your big thing that you want to see and do, and you do everything to get there. And I think in the beginning of entrepreneurship, you're eager to learn all the new things and do all the new things, and that it mirrors a little bit of where your life is at the time. Newly married, I had no kids, working through any and all the things, like hours are really flexible, and new parts of the personal life start to take shape. And one day you achieve that level, and what you thought you would feel at that level, what you thought you would experience at that level may or may not have matched up. And for me, there was a little bit of mismatch. There was a new sense of this is what I want to be doing, and I want to be doing more of these because it's even in more alignment with what I believe my gifts are to be sharing. But then there was also this misalignment of I don't want to be doing these other things. And I had to reshape what that goal looked like for me. And for me, that is building out a structure that's a little bit bigger. That is creating more flexibility that I otherwise never permitted myself to have. That is sharing a lot more of who I am personally that no one really knows about me because I've kept so much of my life private. And there's a way to walk that line for me in the right way of sharing who I am, but I don't necessarily need to share about, my family. I don't need to put my kids on social media because that's not something that we want to be doing, but I can still share who they are, what they're like, their names and whatnot. And there's a way to sort of walk that line that still feels authentic and genuine to who I am and what I want to be sharing with people. So the evolution of entrepreneurship and the way that we get to something, and now we have to reshift the sort of tandem of our personal life and our corporate life, right? What our company is doing and how we're living outside of that company, and where those two intersections come, especially as a creative owner, they always sort of work together and play off of each other. The goal for me had to shift and it had to change, and working with a core value coach and doing this work centered me so much more in giving me the permission to move through different spaces and different environments with authenticity, because I'm always trying to stay in alignment with my values. And in the beginning, when the goal is just the goal, your only focus is on $1 million wedding. It's only on making this much money. It's only on, replacing what was your salary if you had it, or buying your dream home, or, making 20% of your income through, affiliate marketing, whatever that is. And for me, once you get to that point, there's always a shift that happens, and you have to realign what that goal is and either get more of it or sort of redefine how the full picture looks. And for me, I had to redefine it.
How did you redefine what the picture like? Was that more like, it sounds like you almost shifted to more like an identity based goal setting, or instead it was like this, like how do you?
I think it goes back to the silos. So for a long time, it was like, this is the individual silo of my planning and design company. This is House of Joy. What do I want to achieve with House of Joy? This is, I moved all the education out from underneath House of Joy into House of Samantha. So this is more of like my personal brand, my teaching education brand. And then I have my intimate experiences, which is like a conference platform with kinetic experiences. And trying to do all of them as somebody who has such huge goals for myself, trying to do all of them as if they were 3 full-fledged mega companies wasn't sustainable from the time commitment. But when I looked at them and layered them on top of each other, more of like a Venn diagram, and took what were, the different branches, I'll go back to the tree analogy, what were the different segments of the tree are all different segments of the companies, and really brought that back down to the root system. At the root of everything I do is me. And it mirrored that with my core value work in terms of finding what all my core value work was. How do I pull the missions into each? And then how do I come back into, at the end of the day, I'm the same person who's showing up in every room, regardless of what room I'm showing up in. It sort of equipped me to be able to navigate through different spaces and different conversations, because so quickly I could show up as a planner designer for the House of Joy at my local WIPA chapter, but I'm having this really in-depth conversation with somebody over more meaningful connections, or trying to figure out how they can improve their styling work because they want to, be more valuable to planners and up level to publications. And now I'm talking from the standpoint of an educator and as a teacher of styling techniques. So it equipped me to get really focused on what my core values are and what my mission is and what the impact is I want to have, so that I can step into any room that I want to step into, but I can also say no to any room that doesn't serve that mission.
Yeah. I think what you just said about you're getting back to your core, like the impact you want to have, and you're focused on the impact, how that helps you say no to things, because your impact is how you're like helping others, right? And you're serving and bringing them value. So it sounds like you did the work of figuring out what is your core values and like your gifting of what you're really good at. And then from there, you're like, okay, now I have like this new true north that I'm going off of. It's not like this like maybe monetary thing, but it's a way that I want to be spending my time in a way that's like a good return on an investment of something that like fills you up. And then from there, you could, like that's what you're like the most beneficial, I guess, as of like, it can look different ways from different angles, but you're still doing that core, like you're still showing up authentically you. And from there, you're giving a ton of value to whoever you're kind of, whether it's like on a podcast sharing insight or you're
Right.
with a wedding planning client, you have
Right.
all the same, that common thread, but then it's easier to say no because you're like, well, if I have this way that I can give someone like, I don't know, a ratio of value of like 100 of whatever value. But if I say yes to this thing, I'm only giving like 10 of value. Right. So it's like easier where it's like, I want to help this person at a higher level and like leverage my impact to the highest level possible because it's giving, you know what I mean? It's giving instead of taking.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
when you view like charging or making money as I'm taking from like this part of the pie that's like limited instead of I'm creating something totally new. I think that's just like a mental shift that can really change too, because if you're focusing on not chasing something that once you get somebody else can't have, but viewing of how do I create something new that can let other people have more. It's a much more like encourage, like something that's like worth like working at, if that makes sense. I think it can really shift the way you like spend your time. And I think Craig Groeschel, I heard him, he has a leadership podcast, and he was talking about this line of like when you're figuring out how you're spending your time and like what to say yes or no to. One little test that he had that I found really helpful is, are you spending your time or are you investing it? And spending your time could be something, well, I'm just doing it and it's like, I'm going to have to do it again, right? Like I'm writing a blog post, I'm going to have to do it again. But if you coach someone how to do
And
it.
layer that on with the transactional amount of time that any of those take, spending your time is very often quick. It's very much like and that's like a habit replacement I've had to work on is those quick, like cortisol hits of achievement, instead of looking at it from an investment is often long-term, right? So I might be investing in, I hear the analogy a lot when it comes to like, I want to do destination work. Well, that's great. That's like such an umbrella word. Like what destination and where, like what aligns with your clients, right? But when you're looking at a new market, like getting to know it, investing in those relationships is often a long-term thing. You might work there next year, or you might work there in 3 years, but you've got to start the investment now in order to see that return. I also like to look at a little bit like a little bit of like an empire or like a legacy framework, from like the mindset of like, what is the legacy I'm building? And when I'm gone, how will my legacy live on? Like what impact will I have had on the companies and the people that I've worked with that will go and live beyond what I've, the spending the time with them versus investing the time with them. I want to invest the time so that I leave a legacy and an impact behind beyond the time just spent.
I love that. That's a really cool way to like frame the way you're spending your time, like an impact.
And sometimes to me that mirrors with like thinking of more of like the empires. Like what is your total sort of Star Wars thought process? But like what is the larger reach? What does your whole like empire look like? And I think when you hit your initial goal, whatever that might be, the 100,000 mark or whatever, as an example, sometimes your empire and your legacy might take a different shape. It might not be the same service or product you've been offering, but it might be taking it from a different angle or speaking at it from a different perspective that still plays into your larger goal.
I love that. What would you say is the biggest limiting belief you had that you ended up like, I don't know, challenging, I don't know, whatever the word is, like you stopped buying this lie, I guess, when you were stuck that like had the biggest, now looking back, like, whoa, like that's just, it would have been such a different trajectory.
Yeah, but I can't do it. I have imposter syndrome from time to time. Very much so, being the middle of 5 where there's always something and someone achieving, it sort of became a fuel for me for what I did for a long time, like proving to my family that I could do and achieve something. But there was a moment where I identified, why do I care what they think that I can or cannot achieve? And I really changed it into, what is it that I want to try and achieve? And that, it's again, something I'm still always working on, but it's helped me get in front of things more often. It's currently manifesting itself in not getting in front of the camera more on my own platforms, underneath my own accord, right? Like I'm not the one at issue. I can get in front of people. I could talk all day long. I like doing it. It's easy for me. Feels comfortable to me, but it's easier to do it in somebody else's platform or someone else's room that they created, rather than getting on my own Instagram channel or creating my own Loom video to drop in my own newsletter. It's something that holds me back, that I look for the perfection around it. And so learning that, imperfectly perfect is a suitable way to show up in a space. And, John Dolan is a great example of that, of somebody who sort of, you hear it from the right people that just sort of hit a note to you, and changing that where it doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm not doing it for anybody else other than myself. And again, it sounds selfish, but my mission isn't about me. It's my mission. And so I have to do it and I have to make that impact. But the impact is made on other people as well as it is on myself.
Yeah. I love that. I know. I'm excited. We're talking to John in a couple weeks. And I loved what he, like, I mean, one, like what he shared on stage, but also just like chatting to him, like in the pool, just his like mindset where like, it's really cool too, just having someone who's been in the industry for so long and has obviously had like a lot of success and like done a lot and has beautiful work, but to be so grounded and just like at the end of the day, we're all people, right? And I think that's one cool thing of like with Kinetic and having these like in-person experiences where it's like, we're all people, we have kids, we have family, you know what I mean? Like there's all these things. And I think you touched on like, it's not selfish, just if you're not doing something that's like lighting you up and you're like, oh, this is what I was created to do.
Right.
It's a disservice to whoever you're serving. Like who are you do, you know what I mean? Like if you're not like fired up about it, you're on a ticking, you can only like, there's only so much willpower and you're going to just end up burning out. And now who are you serving in the first place versus if you can find like what you're saying, like what is it that you're passionate about? And like with John's case, like how he's sharing about like creating the art that fulfills you. And then you're going to attract the people that find value in it. And you know what I mean? It's just like a different like shift where it's like, yeah, you don't need to prove it. But it's just what is like the long-term thing. And I think that's what kind of comes back to people, whether you like, you could start a business in 2 years and get to the point where like you're doing pretty well, or you could struggle for like 10 years and get to a point and you're still grinding. And I think that's what like the next step looks like of like getting to that identity based of like, what do you want out of it long-term and what fills you up? And then you can get out of it where you're like serving from like an overflow. Right. I think that's something that's like well, a lot of people would just feel like, is that even possible? You know, like, how do it's like, oh, this is what it is. It's work, you know? And I think so much we view work as just something you got to grind through, but not realize that you're actually being a disservice to others instead of really focusing on what you are like fired up about, you know?
I think something that parents learn really early on is that you have to be able to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. And it's something that a grid college girlfriend and I would talk about because she never really ever wanted to be alone. And I would always say, like, you've just got to like spend the weekend by yourself. Because like, if you can't spend the weekend by yourself, how can you spend the weekend in a quality way with somebody else, like in a relationship? And so as a parent, you have to learn how to take care of yourself in order for yourself to be the best parent, because to your kids, to spend the best quality time with your kids. And I think the same is true in business. I have to be the best business owner and be my best version of myself within my business and the business framework in order to serve my clients in the best way. And yes, we all fall off that horse. Yes, we all stop working out. Yes, we all eat junk food every once in a while. But it's about getting back on and having the perspective of, okay, I can do this. And I know that having meetings at night does not serve me or my clients very well, because the only time I can have nighttime clients is after 9 o'clock. And at that point, I am mentally and emotionally drained from being the best parent that I can be when my kids are home, that I cannot serve a client well. So I just can't do nighttime appointments. It just no longer works with my life. But I don't say, no, I don't do them. I do. It's not going to be the best way that I can serve you, because this is how we both are going to feel in order to make the biggest impact on the relationship that we're going to have. That's not the environment that I think will serve us very well. Let's try to find another time to do that. So I think the same is true for any business owner. I mean, the parent analogy works really well for a lot of people, but the same is true that often we can grind out so hard doing something that it's going back and saying, no, what is the best way for my business to be structured? Just because 5 people said do it this way doesn't mean that that serves my life, right? Maybe you're a Pacific, an East Coast person who works with people in California a lot. You've got to structure your hours differently. Maybe that doesn't really work. My husband worked my brother worked for a financial advisor in California that did a lot with the stock market. So they had to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning because they had to be up when the stock market opened. So they had a different way of life, and that works for people. But you have to be able to look inside yourself to say, this is how I want to define that. And you have to find the different voices that are sharing those stories. And that's something that I strive to do with Kinetic, is show people that you can define success and you can define what your business is in a very different way, but one that serves you and your family in the best way possible.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think, also being a parent of 2 kids, like I know for me, like it's not, I was actually going to ask you what the biggest pivot you had, like now having kids and you're like when you ended up having kids, but it sounds like would you say is the?
I mean, COVID.
just-
I had my daughter a couple weeks after the state of Ohio shut down, so that was probably the biggest pivot, is learning how to parent in a COVID era and dealing with all of that. But I'm a parent who, my kids are in daycare at 3 and 5 right now, and my daughter will start school in the fall, and that was important to me. And so when I meet new moms and they're like, how do you do this and how do you do all of that? I am a very respectful, warm place for people to talk to, but I like to advocate for understanding how you can be the best version of every version that you are as a mom, as a sibling, as a parent, as a friend. How can you be the best version of those, and putting in, the processes and shapes and things that you need in order to do that. And for me, there's no way I could be fully committed to my work and be fully committed to my kids at the same time. That's not something I can double dip in simultaneously. That multitasking doesn't exist. I'm fully in with my kids, or I'm fully in with work, and they've got to have somebody else that can be fully into them when I need to work.
Yeah, I love that. We went through the same thing where it's like you have you got a whole thing on Instagram where it's like parenting advice from Instagram is usually not the best, especially because you can hear a million different voices and you get the parent shame or whatever. But same way for us. I'm like, you can't do two things at once. I think one thing he actually talks about, like the live multitasking, how many of us believe it, which is a whole, he like breaks it down very well. But like for us, like we found, okay, for us, Rachel goes to school from 9 to 1, and it's like it's a constraint. We're like, okay, and that's, if I'm going to like do a podcast or whatever, like that's our time to do it, or work. And that's the window of time. And after school, like maybe grandma picks them up or whatever, but it just shifts it. But also if they were always home, like we tried it for a little bit and we still have a business to run. So it's like, we're not serving either very well. It's just okay to be different for every person,
And maybe when they're older and you guys are traveling the world, you have a business manager who stays home because that's what she loves to do, or he loves to do. And it's formatted to where you guys are homeschooling, right? Like I know plenty of people who just are mobile 100% of the time. And homeschooling makes the most sense for them. And I think that's knowing and empowering yourself with what all the options are, and asking people how they do it, but then going a step deeper and asking why they do it that way often reveals how it's serving their life in the way that is the best situation for them. And you can discern through that of what you can do for yourself and what changes you can make to your own process and your own lifestyle.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, getting down to that why is a huge. You read Start With Why, right? Yeah, no, I love that book. I like rereading it right now because it's just such a good.
Yeah, it's on my reread list. I'm trying to remember what else I've got on my reread list. I've got a couple of things.
I've been on a big reread list. I got the little Kindle Scribe, which you can like, because I'm a big like, I just putting the kids to bed. I can't do a light. So I finally was like, I need to get a Kindle because if I'm on my phone, I'm going to get distracted. But if I have a book, I can't put a light on. So I was like, okay, I could do the backlight display thing.
I like the Libby app because I can just listen and then I don't need the phone at all. I just put the headphones in and I do dishes while I do something else.
It is the Libby app also. Okay, little hack. Libby also, you can, if you have a Kindle, you can check them out to your Kindle.
I've heard that.
So I just got a ton of books for free. Which is crazy. Jessica showed me. I didn't figure it out. She figured it out. But but I've been going through and like now because you can take notes on it. So now I'm like, okay, I've like most of them I did Audible too, but now I'm like taking notes on it. I'm like, oh, all these ideas I had. It's like nice to be able to write down what who was it? Myron Golden on his podcast, he's quoting, I forget who he's quoting, but I guess he said instead of highlighting things when you read or like clipping it or writing down the quote, instead of writing down the quote, write what the quote made you think of or like feel.
Well, that's a good journal exercise.
And it shifted the way I've been taking notes because like, oh, this is good. And then I was like, wait a second, if I write down how it made me feel, and then I could go through and take all those notes and like actually have your own creative thought. Because usually it's like, you could be reading Start With Why or something, but then it's something more specific to the wedding industry or parenting or whatever. And you can kind of like remember what you were thinking in that moment versus I'll highlight something and then go back. I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, why did that jump out at me? Because now I don't know what I'm talking about.
My problem is when they get to be so good that they become an activity, that it's like a double-edged sword. Because I'm like, now I have this like homework lift because I want to take action from what we talked about or what my thoughts were on it.
Yeah.
Yesterday I was listening, or this morning I was listening to a podcast and it was going through these things, and I was like, okay, I have like a playlist on Spotify of like rewatch and do stuff, and then Fridays I have a block of like go do the thing. So it's like, okay, it like brainstormed
that's
all
good.
this content around it, but I'm
Yeah.
usually doing something with my hands, and so I'm like, I can't sit down and take notes, and I don't want to be at my desk anymore. So that's why I'm listening to the podcast or something, or the book. So I paused the story brand because I was like, hold the phone. I need to do this not just with one company. I need to like simultaneously do this with all of them. So I'm like, pause, exercise,
interactive book.
download the workbook, like need to. Yeah. So that a couple of them are like that where it's, I need to build in a more of a journaling habit. That's one of the ones I'm trying to get into. And I just have to try it a couple different ways. It's not as fluid as I want it to be.
I know, but just doing it
turns into like a task
you know,
list. I need to probably do one of the things I want to try doing is a voice memo journaling exercise that pulls it into a transcript, because I come through a lot of really great ideas when I'm walking and talking. So just pacing and then having the transcript will save me a lot of time being like, what did I say? How did I say it? How did I phrase that? Like, what was that content thing I could just copy and paste over to my content creator?
Because if you had it in your head, it's so much easier just to get it out. I know, I'm the worst. Vanessa on our team, she's a rock star. She's like our director of ops. But sometimes in Slack, I'll have an idea, but I need to get a better note thing for me to drop all ideas. So what I've been doing is just on Slack, I'll just do a voice memo.
Voice memo, and she just takes
and then she
my
puts
VA
it
just takes
somewhere.
the transcript.
We love you, Vanessa.
That's how we do a lot of SOPs. She's like, here you go, just walk me. You either loom it or I voice memo it in Slack, and then she has the transcript. So she's like, got the outline and cleans up all the stuff, and then looks at it and is like, I'm missing these 3 gaps. What did you forget to tell me?
Yeah, but it's crazy
So much
because that's
faster.
like, I'm such a perfectionist that if I start typing it out, I'm like, versus I might ramble for like 3 or 4 minutes, which is annoying. But also 3 to 4 minutes is a really long voice memo, but a 10-minute meeting would be a crazy short meeting. So it also avoids the whole meeting.
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
Nice too. But
Exactly.
anyways, well, we go on about like all the different little tips and tricks of what you're running with the team. But I know there's all the little things you figure out like that works with your, like how you work, and like figuring out a good way to.
I feel like you have to like kind of hack yourself and just figure out like how is it that you work? What is it that you work? And how can you? And the voice memos have been like a perfect hack for me.
Yeah. No, I love it. I'm glad I'm not the only one for being crazy with the voice memos. But
I get really into doing like email responses too that way.
Oh yeah.
It adds a lot more
Like,
personality.
this is what it is. Yeah. Oh, will you actually respond to an email with a voice memo?
I will voice memo it into the email on like Gmail. You can do it, or like from your phone, and it'll write it all out, and then I'll go back and just edit it, but it has a lot more personability. My corporate days have scarred me to where my emails are very dry and very corporate-y. So I try to remember to be like, hi, how are you? Because I can forget to do that.
But if you're doing the voice, it's easier to like remember to actually
just happens.
like say it. Yeah. Before you leave, I'd love to know, because we talked a lot about books, if you had one book that changed your life.
Oh, can I pull up my phone real quick? I'm really bad at remembering the titles of pretty much anything. Artists, I don't know. I finally
started doing a note on my phone that just had all the books I read each year, so I could keep track of them, and then my want to read list.
That's a good question. I don't know if I have one that changed. I don't know if I would say if it was one as much as I would say it was like a series of ones, if I'm being honest. Earlier this year, I got into Brene Brown books, and like the series of those at the culmination of what I had going on in my life was really transformative as a whole. Just hearing the way that she talked and advocated and worked through stuff on top of what I was personally working through. Just she said it in such a way that I could relate to and I could adapt from. That was really, really meaningful to me. A lot of other stuff I find I overlap with somewhat, but not all the way. So you're trying to still work your stuff out. But a lot of the Brene Brown books sort of just resonated at that point in my life earlier this year in a really good way.
Oh, I love it. Was there like one specifically, or are you just saying like all the ones?
I got a new phone 3 weeks ago, and it's not.
It's okay then.
None of mine are coming up because I haven't signed into Libby in a while. So.
Oh, that's the worst thing you have to sign in. Were you always a reader?
No, I hated reading.
Audiobook?
I tried to not do reading in high school. What shifted it? 2 things. I've always, when it came to books, I've always liked reading books in relation to movies and doing a like creative analysis. You could almost think of it like a book report of dissecting how the book is different than the movies. And that was always a really fun creative escape for me, and discovering that that can be it was almost like a carrot and a stick. If I read the book, I could watch the movie. If I watched the movie, I then had to read the book. So sort of a fun exercise that I just gamified it a little bit with for myself. And then I think the other side of it was, as an entrepreneur, there are topics and things that like I want to dig deeper into, and finding thought leaders around it that just weren't in the regular flow of content that I was consuming. The snippets of things on Instagram and whatnot are all at the basis of an algorithm, or what someone, it's a catch snippet, and that's great. But I wanted to like dig deeper in tandem with my own physical work related to it. So the audiobooks allowed me to sort of step away from TV. I think that was sort of the underlying factor at the time when I wanted to do a lot less, media in my life. And so the audiobooks became a great way to listen to something, increase my knowledge base on topics, and sort of dig in a little bit more in a way that felt tangible and flexible to my lifestyle.
I like that. So it was like specifically doing audiobooks. So
I had to do audiobooks. I own so many books. I like the paper. I'm a paper person, so I like them.
Yeah.
But after having kids, the paper books, if I go sit in bed to go read something, I will fall asleep. Like I can fall asleep in lots of places, and usually it's with a book. So I stopped doing that and did the audiobook because I can multitask on a personal level. Of I can listen to it while I walk my dog and have like the free space. And that's been a really great exercise and sort of adaptation of habits in my life.
Okay, I love audiobooks. I crack up whenever people are like, well, I don't read or do audiobooks. I'm like, hey, I'm a dyslexic boy that I think read half a book in all of his school years, like including college somehow. So I'm like, if there's any knowledge being transferred, I'm like, I count that. But no, I love that you said replacing the stuff. The one quote I heard that kind of got me to want to start reading more, I forget what book it was. It was irony. It was in a book. Jessica was reading it, and she was kind of giving me the quotes, and I started reading it. But it was breaking down the math of how much time the average American spends watching Netflix. Instead, if you replace that with reading, you'd have like the equivalent of 1 or 2 PhDs a year of like how much time you spend reading. Like that's how, like, it's obviously not directly, but it's like the amount of time to get your PhD for how many books you need to read. It was like the same amount of books. Yeah. Like obviously if you're reading fiction, nonfiction, but I just thought that was crazy. Where I was like, well, I had the time, it's there. Yeah.
The quote that you brought up reminded me of, I heard the statistic around millionaires, not just the statistic around like they have 7 forms of income, which is great, but it was about habits and the habits of the most successful people and what those are. And so I have started getting up earlier in the morning. I do less media at the top of the day, but I brought in books, and it was like the average millionaire consumes somewhere between like, I don't know, don't quote me on the number, but let's say somewhere between 30 and 50 books a year. And I was like, okay, let's break that big number down, because that big number can feel really hard. 30 divided by 12. Okay, so that's, 3 books a month or less than 3 books a month, 2.5. So, okay, how can I do 2.5 books a month? Like, what does that actually look like? So I started looking up like the length of books. Most of them are like between 6 and 8 hours. So let's say 7. Yeah. 7 hours. Crazy. That's like an hour a day. I can find that. If not, I can find 30 minutes over the course of 2 weeks and do that. So I was like, all right, 2 books. Let's aim for 2 books a month. And that was sort of the goal I started off this year. I have a good friend who's a big bookworm, and she was like, I just hit my 50 goal. And I was like, what on earth? And she's like, I do a lot of audiobooks when I do anything. She's like, I'm like, tell me when you're doing these. She's like, in the shower while I do dishes. She's like, whenever she's really not around her kids, she's connected to an audiobook, which is awesome. I need sometimes a little less voice in my head than that. So sometimes I need the white space of just a walk or lunch outside by myself. But it's something like that where it's like they're just taking in so much more information. If I want to be that knowledgeable person, I need that next level of information and education. So they're not just business books. I like, the self-help. I like a good story from time to time. But
totally. Yeah, I think it's interesting where, obviously there's still a good time, because I went on the full side where I'm like, in the shower, I'm like getting ready. I'm like always listening, and I'd blow through books, but I was like, okay, I need time to also think and process them and have like creativity.
I've tried to alternate like a businessy one and then like a fun book so that I can mentally be processing in the back that businessy one.
Oh, totally. I think that's a good way to help. And the one thing that got me, because I'd hear people, I'm like, okay, an hour a day, like I get the idea. but I'm still like, I run into habits where if I'm not doing it, I'm like, well, if I'm not doing it, like I'd kind of just give up on it. And I heard, I think it was in Craig Rochell's book, The Power to Change. He was like, if you want to get a habit to really work, it has to be like less than 2 minutes a day. I was like, hold on a second. So it was like literally the only way I actually started reading. I think I read like, I didn't read a ton. I think I read like 18 books last year, 17 books. So it was like more than I ever did before, but it was like, I want to start reading more. But to even get to that point, I just started reading 2 minutes a day. And he's like, even set a timer and like stop yourself. Because if you're at the end of the day and you're like, I just need to read like 2 minutes. If you know it's going to really be like 10 or 20 minutes, you like convince yourself not to. But if you just know, and it works for working out too, but just breaking it down, because his point is getting back to identity. If you're like, oh, I want to do this action, you only have so much willpower and you're going to run out. Right. But if you shift your identity and you decide, no, like, it's like, oh, I eat healthy. Like I'm a healthy person. That's going to shift your decisions of like, do I go to McDonald's or do I go to like maybe Chipotle and get a salad? Like it's just, but if it's just sheer willpower, it's really hard to white knuckle it. So he's like, if you read just 2 minutes a day, what you're doing is you're training yourself that you're a reader. And even if it's just a little bit, you're still a reader. Mm-hmm. So for me, like having conversations, people would talk about books and I felt like an imposter because I'm like, well, I don't really read books though. But then I just started reading 2 minutes a day. I was like, well, hey, I'm like, I think you'd still finish like 1 or 2 books a year if you only read 2 minutes a day. I did the math because 2 minutes, I think it's a book and a half if it's like 8 hours, because it's still 2 minutes a day weirdly adds up to like 3, what is it? I forget what the math was, but
I mean, it's an hour a month.
2 minutes is literally nothing. Like it's how much time you just waste in a second. But for me, that was a huge shift to just shift my identity. And then once I did that, it was a lot easier to like move out of it. Like it's almost like if you're in a rut, like a bike and you're like a foot down in dirt, to turn is like impossible. But if you get up and you start going slow, like you're not going to have a massive rut of habit of like reading 2 hours a day, but you may get one and then 2 minutes turns to 5 minutes.
And I think that's true with any habit that you want to form, like across the board, business, personal, all of it. I think the more that you do just like the small thing, and that's where the habit replacement started with me, is I was like, I want to work less, but I couldn't just be like, okay, great, I'm going to sit on my hands until 10 o'clock and do nothing. Like, this isn't fun. I had to like replace it with something else, realizing, okay, now I have less time. 5 o'clock, still 5 o'clock. I got to be done and pick up the kids. Like that helped out really, really well. And have you read the Habits book? The one with like, that's yellow with the red like carousel on it? I'll send you like the official title.
What is that one called? Okay, so it's not Atomic Habits. It's a different one?
No, it's a different Habits
of the Household?
No.
Jessica just added one to the library. I'm looking up right now on my little Kindle.
I don't know if I have it on here.
So it's not Habits of the Household, has like a circle thing on it.
I'll have to look it up and send it to you. But it's it goes into sort of habit forming. It's really interesting in terms of like how they break down habits and the development of it. And so it's like a small thing, you know, don't just go out and run a marathon. You've got to like get your body accustomed to it. Right. And so it's, if you haven't been on a podcast, like just put the camera in front of you and talk to the camera. Are you comfortable? Do you like it? Do you know what your things are? All of the practice around it.
I spent so much more time like dragging my feet of trying to get everything perfect. And Jessica's like, just go record the thing, send the email, have the message. And I sent the email, and then like a ton of people, I was like, oh, okay, well now we're recording. I have to figure out however I want to light the office and do the whole thing. And then it's like, oh, I think like, because we were like batch recording a lot of these, and it was like a couple in a week. I'm like, whoa, like I could do 2 to 3 in a day. Like, okay, I went from like waiting all this time, and now it's like this part's actually a lot easier. It's just, and I think that point is like usually 90% of the block to overcome is a mental of like the problem you're creating in your head, versus once you just start doing it, it's actually not that hard. You just tell yourself it's really hard. Once you can start doing it and then enjoy it, you're like, okay, now I'm getting momentum and I can start growing on it. But
and the energy you have as like as a fresh entrepreneur doing something is always like, done is better than perfect. I just got to get it. I got to try. Like you're eager. You're very eager. Once you've established a brand, once you've established an identity, the sort of the movement, and that was something that was very like handicapping for me, as I was like, this is who I am in the House of Joy framework. Like, how do I morph this? How do I change this? How do I not just like burn it all down and start over? And it was like, it's okay to like be who you are and share those things out, especially when you realize that if it's on Instagram, maybe every 5th person's going to see it the first time and every 2nd person will see it the second time, you know? And so that habit, it's a habit adjustment. And when you're more established, you're less eager, and you've got to remind yourself, I just got to do it because I got to find out what sticks. And you're better off finding out what sticks before you've invested hundreds of hours into setting something up than not.
Without ever actually doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Awesome. Well, thank you, Samantha, for your time. I really appreciate it.
You're
I could
welcome.
talk about habits and all that stuff forever. But before you go, if people want to hear more about how can people get in touch?
Yeah, I think there's two great ways. The two best ways to sort of get in touch are either of our newsletters. So, underneath
Hmm.
House of Samantha, our education and personal branding brand of mine, I do a really, really great newsletter. It's a good example of being done is better than perfect. I just sort of started and find out how I like doing it and the workflow around it. So you can join that newsletter at House of Samantha, or if you're really into connection, networking, and finding more into the business side of yourself, the newsletter that we do over at Kinetic is really driven and really community focused. So those are two of the best ways.
Awesome.
Otherwise,
We'll be sure to link
Instagram.
those.
Instagram. We're always on Instagram. So
Sweet. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. And yeah, we'll make sure we link those below. But awesome. Well, until next time, thanks for your time and hope the rest of your year goes wonderful.
thanks. Likewise.